Welcome to History Files, where we uncover the forgotten stories that shaped our world. January 2nd, 1492. The gates of Granada swing open for the final time. King Boabdil, the last Muslim ruler of Spain, hands over the keys to his city to Ferdinand and Isabella. As he rides into exile, he turns back one final time to see the Alhambra, the jewel of Moorish civilization, now flying Christian banners. His mother, Aixa, watches him weep and speaks words that will echo through history. Weep like a woman for what you could not defend like a man. But this isn't just a story about one man's failure. This is the story of how nearly 800 years of Islamic civilization in Europe came to an end. How the most advanced city in medieval Europe fell in a siege that combined medieval brutality with Renaissance innovation. How religious tolerance gave way to the Inquisition, and how one surrender changed the course of 3 continents. This is the story of Granada, 1492, the final chapter of Al-Andalus, and the beginning of a new, darker age. To understand Granada's fall, we must understand what was being lost. In the year 1491, while most of Europe lived in relative darkness, Granada shone like a beacon. The city had running water in every home, something London wouldn't achieve for another 400 years. The streets were paved and lit at night. The University of Granada possessed one of the world's greatest libraries, containing texts on mathematics, astronomy, medicine, and philosophy that Europe had forgotten. The Alhambra Palace complex wasn't just beautiful. It was a masterpiece of engineering. Water flowed uphill through ingenious hydraulic systems. Gardens bloomed in arranged mathematical patterns. Every surface told a story in calligraphy and geometric precision. Visitors from Christian Europe described it as something from paradise. But Granada was more than architecture and engineering. It was a city where Muslims, Christians, and Jews lived together in relative harmony, what historians call convivencia. Muslim scholars worked alongside Jewish physicians and Christian merchants. The synagogue, mosque, and church stood within sight of each other. The irony is devastating. Granada was the most tolerant, most advanced, most cultured city in Spain. And that's precisely why Ferdinand and Isabella wanted it destroyed. Because Granada represented everything the Catholic monarchs opposed: religious pluralism, intellectual freedom, scientific inquiry, Islamic culture, Jewish prosperity. For Ferdinand and Isabella, Granada wasn't just a military objective. It was an ideological enemy. By 1491, Granada was the last surviving taifa, the last independent Muslim kingdom in Iberia. For centuries, various Muslim states had dominated Spain, but Christian kingdoms had slowly reconquered the peninsula in what they called the Reconquista, the reconquest. Kingdom after kingdom had fallen. City after city had been taken, and now only Granada remained. A final island of Islamic civilization, surrounded by hostile Christian kingdoms, sustained by treaties, tributes, and increasingly desperate diplomacy. The ruler of Granada was Muhammad XII, known to history as Boabdil. He was 31 years old in 1491, and he was in an impossible position. His kingdom was tiny, just the city of Granada and its immediate surroundings. He was trapped between the might of Castile and Aragon to the north, and the Mediterranean to the south. The Ottoman Empire, which might have helped, was too far away and too occupied with its own wars. Worse, Boabdil's own legitimacy was questionable. He had seized power from his father with Christian help. Many of Granada's people viewed him as a puppet and a traitor. His uncle, El Zagal, the Valiant, commanded the loyalty of the military faction and controlled parts of the kingdom. Granada was divided, surrounded, and militarily outmatched. But it had survived this long through diplomacy, tribute payments, and the formidable defenses of the city itself. Those defenses were extraordinary. Granada sat in the foothills of the Sierra Nevada mountains, with natural barriers on 3 sides. The Alhambra fortress overlooked the city from the high ground. Walls 40 feet high and 15 feet thick ringed the entire city. Towers every 100 yards provided defensive positions. Underground passages allowed defenders to move unseen. And the city's water supply came from mountain springs that couldn't be easily cut off. Multiple sieges had failed against Granada over the centuries. The city had withstood everything medieval warfare could throw at it. But in 1491, Ferdinand and Isabella arrived with something new. They weren't planning a medieval siege. They were about to conduct the first modern siege in European history. And Granada had no answer for what was coming. April 1491. Ferdinand and Isabella arrive outside Granada with 80,000 soldiers, the largest Christian army ever assembled in Spain. But they're not planning a quick assault. They're planning something Granada has never faced before: total encirclement and systematic starvation. Ferdinand's strategy is revolutionary in its thoroughness. He doesn't just want to defeat Granada militarily. He wants to make it impossible for the city to exist as an independent entity. First, he orders the construction of a siege city, not a temporary camp, an actual city. Within weeks, a town called Santa Fe, Holy Faith, rises from the plains outside Granada. It has streets laid out in a grid pattern, permanent buildings, churches, barracks, hospitals, supply warehouses, and administrative centers. Santa Fe is built in the shape of a cross, a deliberate symbol. This isn't just a military base. It's a statement of religious and cultural dominance, and it's built to last. Ferdinand makes it clear: this siege will not end until Granada surrenders. If it takes months, they'll wait. If it takes years, they'll wait longer. The message is psychological as much as military. Every day, Boabdil and his people can look out from Granada's walls and see a functioning Christian city, built specifically to outlast them. But Ferdinand's innovation goes beyond patience. He implements a complete naval blockade of Granada's coast, cutting off any hope of supply or reinforcement from North Africa. Christian galleys patrol constantly, intercepting any ship attempting to reach Granada. Then comes the engineering marvel that makes the siege truly modern: the circumvallation. Ferdinand orders the construction of a continuous wall around the entire city. 10 miles of fortification with watchtowers every quarter mile, trenches, earthworks, and artillery positions. This is military engineering on a scale Europe hasn't seen since Rome. The wall isn't just to keep Granada's army in. It's to create a controlled environment where Ferdinand dictates every variable. Nothing enters Granada without his permission. No one leaves without his knowledge. Granada is now inside a giant prison, slowly running out of food. Inside the city, Boabdil faces a nightmare scenario. His population is swelling with refugees from the surrounding countryside, all fleeing to Granada for protection. More people means more mouths to feed and more pressure on limited supplies. The city's granaries are full the siege's start, but Ferdinand knows this, and he's willing to wait until they're empty. He's calculating exactly how long Granada can last: population size, food reserves, consumption rates, potential harvest from gardens within walls. This is siege warfare as mathematics. And then Ferdinand unveils his final advantage: artillery. Granada's walls were built to resist catapults, battering rams, and siege towers, medieval weapons. They weren't designed for cannons. And Ferdinand has brought the most advanced artillery in Europe. His master gunner is a German engineer named Francisco Ramirez. He's brought over 200 pieces of artillery, including massive bombards that fire stone balls weighing 200 pounds. These aren't used for assault. Not yet. They're for psychological warfare. Every day, at precise times, Ramirez fires the cannons at Granada's walls. Not enough to breach them immediately, but enough to chip away at them. Stone by stone, the walls crumble. The constant thunder of artillery becomes the soundtrack of the siege. People inside Granada can't sleep. Children cry at every boom. The ground shakes. It's deliberate psychological torture. Ferdinand wants Granada's population to break mentally before they break militarily. And it's working. By summer 1491, conditions inside Granada are deteriorating rapidly. Food prices skyrocket. A loaf of bread that cost 1 coin in April costs 50 by July. Wealthy families start hoarding. The poor begin starving. Boabdil tries to maintain morale. He opens the royal granaries to feed the population. He organizes the distribution of remaining supplies. He promises that help is coming from North Africa, from the Ottoman Empire, from somewhere. But everyone can see Santa Fe growing stronger while Granada grows weaker. Christian merchants in the siege city do brisk business. Ferdinand's soldiers are well fed, well-paid, and confident. Inside Granada, people are eating rats, dogs, leather, even tree bark. Boabdil faces an impossible decision. He can surrender now, while he still has some negotiating power, or he can wait, hoping for a miracle, knowing that every day weakens his position. His military commanders urge resistance. Granada has never fallen to a siege. The walls, despite the artillery damage, are still formidable. If they can hold until winter, perhaps the Christian army will be forced to withdraw. But Boabdil knows something his commanders don't. He's been in secret negotiations with Ferdinand for months, and the King of Castile has made him an offer. The question is whether Boabdil will take it, and whether his people will let him. August 1491. Under cover of darkness, Boabdil's representative secretly meets with Ferdinand's negotiators in a tent between the lines. They're discussing the terms of Granada's surrender. Ferdinand's offer is surprisingly generous, at least on paper. If Boabdil surrenders Granada peacefully, Ferdinand will give him a small territory in the Alhambra mountains to rule as a vassal state. He'll be allowed to keep his wealth. His people will be protected. More significantly, Ferdinand promises that Granada's Muslim population can keep their religion, their property, their customs, and their laws. There will be no forced conversions. Mosques will remain open. Islamic law will govern Muslim communities. It's a promise of tolerance that seems almost too good to believe. And it is. But Boabdil doesn't know that yet. The negotiation is delicate. Boabdil can't surrender openly without risking assassination by his own hardliners. The military faction, led by commanders who remember Granada's past glories, would rather die fighting than submit to Christian rule. So the surrender must be staged as a military defeat rather than a negotiated capitulation. Ferdinand and Boabdil are essentially writing a script for Granada's fall, making it appear inevitable rather than chosen. The agreement is called the Treaty of Granada. It's signed secretly in November 1491. The terms are extraordinary in their detail. Granada will be surrendered on January 2nd. 1492 Boabdil will receive the Alpujarras territory plus 30,000 gold Castellanos. All Muslims can remain with full religious freedom. Those who wish to leave for North Africa can do so with their property. Islamic law remains valid for Muslim communities. No Christian can enter a mosque. Uninvited Muslims retain their weapons for self-defense. No Jews who converted to Christianity can be forced to testify against Muslims. It's one of the most tolerant surrender terms in medieval history. Ferdinand presents himself as a merciful conqueror, respecting the rights of the defeated. But there's something sinister in the details. The treaty is designed to be broken. It contains provisions that are practically unenforceable. It makes promises that Ferdinand knows he won't keep. The tolerance is temporary, a way to avoid a bloody final assault that would cost Christian lives. Ferdinand and Isabella are already planning the Alhambra decree, the expulsion of all Jews from Spain. They're already expanding the Inquisition. The promise of religious tolerance is a lie, told to make the surrender peaceful. And Boabdil, desperate and isolated, chooses to believe it. Inside Granada, rumors of secret negotiations leak out. The military faction is furious. They accuse Boabdil of cowardice and treason. There are calls for his assassination and replacement with a leader who will fight to the death. Boabdil's position becomes untenable. He's trapped between Ferdinand outside the walls and his own angry commanders inside. The city is on the verge of civil war, even as it faces external siege. On November 10th, an event occurs that makes surrender inevitable. A massive explosion rocks Granada. One of the city's main powder magazines detonates. Whether by accident or sabotage is never determined. 30 buildings are destroyed. Hundreds die. Worse, a large portion of Granada's remaining gunpowder is lost. Without gunpowder, Granada's artillery is useless. The city's ability to defend itself militarily is gone. The explosion makes the Treaty of Granada's terms a necessity rather than a choice. Boabdil's military commanders, seeing the devastation, finally accept that resistance is futile. But they exact a price. Boabdil must make the surrender appear to be a military defeat rather than a negotiated capitulation. He must be seen fighting to the last possible moment, forced to yield only when all alternatives are exhausted. This fiction will preserve their honor, but it won't save their city. As 1491 ends, Granada prepares for its final days as an independent Muslim kingdom. Families pack their most precious possessions, debating whether to stay under Christian rule or flee to North Africa. The souks are filled with people selling everything they own, trying to convert property into portable wealth. In the Alhambra, Boabdil walks through the palace he's about to lose. The Court of Lions, the Hall of Ambassadors, the intricate arabesques and calligraphy covering every surface. Nearly 150 years of Nasrid dynasty rule, ending with his surrender. His mother, Aixa, doesn't speak to him. His wife prepares for exile. His son, the heir who will never inherit, plays in gardens he'll soon leave forever. On the night of January 1st, 1492, Boabdil holds a final council in the Alhambra. He tells his commanders and advisors that tomorrow, Granada will surrender. Some weep, some rage, some sit in stunned silence. And then, in the early morning hours of January 2nd, the gates of Granada open. January 2nd, 1492. Dawn breaks cold and clear over Granada. The city's gates open, and a procession emerges. Boabdil rides at the front, dressed in his finest robes, maintaining the appearance of a king even in defeat. Behind him come the city's leaders, the military commanders, the scholars, the imams. They're delivering the keys to their city. Ferdinand and Isabella wait on horseback, surrounded by their army. The entire Christian force is assembled in full military display. 80,000 soldiers in armor, banners flying, creating a spectacle of overwhelming power. The meeting happens at a predetermined spot outside the walls. Boabdil dismounts, approaches Ferdinand, and hands him the keys to Granada. According to the script they've agreed upon, Boabdil delivers a formal speech of surrender, acknowledging Christian military superiority. Ferdinand accepts the keys with magnanimous words about peace and tolerance. It's all theater, performed for both armies, making the transfer of power appear legitimate and inevitable. But the real drama happens next. As Boabdil turns to leave, beginning his journey into exile, he looks back at Granada, at the Alhambra rising above the city, at the home he'll never see again, and he begins to cry. His mother, Aixa, riding beside him, speaks the words that will define him in history. Weep like a woman for what you could not defend like a man. It's a devastating moment. Boabdil's tears become the symbol of Muslim Spain's end. The spot where he looked back becomes known as El Último Suspiro del Moro, the last sigh of the Moor. It remains a landmark to this day. But while Boabdil weeps, something else is happening in Granada. The Christian army enters the city, and the promises of tolerance immediately begin to unravel. Ferdinand and Isabella ride directly to the Alhambra. Isabella wants to see the famous palace she's heard so much about. When she enters the Court of Lions and sees the sophistication and beauty of Islamic architecture, she's reportedly moved and troubled, because the Alhambra represents a civilization that, in some ways, surpasses her own. The hydraulic engineering, the mathematical precision of the decoration, the integration of nature and architecture, Christian Spain has nothing comparable. Isabella makes a decision that will have enormous consequences. The Alhambra will not be destroyed. Instead, it will be preserved as a trophy, a monument to Christian victory over Islamic civilization. It will be repurposed, Christianized, but maintained. This decision saves one of the world's greatest architectural treasures. But it's made for the wrong reasons. Not appreciation of the culture that created it, but desire to display a conquered prize. Meanwhile, ordinary Granadans watch Christian soldiers occupy their city. The soldiers are under strict orders to respect property and persons. Ferdinand wants a peaceful occupation. For the first few weeks, the Treaty of Granada seems to hold. Muslim families continue their daily lives. Mosques remain open. The call to prayer still echoes through the streets. Markets function. It appears that the promise of tolerance might actually be kept. But beneath the surface, pressure is building. Christian settlers begin arriving, demanding the best houses and shops. Church officials start cataloging mosques for future conversion. The Inquisition's representatives take notes on who attends Friday prayers. The Archbishop of Granada, Hernando de Talavera, initially tries to honor the treaty terms. He's a relatively moderate figure who believes in gradual, voluntary conversion through persuasion rather than force. He learns Arabic, engages in theological debates, and respects Islamic culture. But Talavera is soon replaced by Cardinal Francisco Jiménez de Cisneros, a hardline religious fanatic who views the treaty as an obstacle to be overcome. Cisneros has very different plans for Granada's Muslims. Within months of Granada's surrender, the promises begin to break. First subtly, then openly, then violently. Forced conversions begin. Muslims are told they must convert to Christianity or leave Spain, abandoning all property. Mosques are seized and converted into churches. Arabic books are burned, including irreplaceable scientific and philosophical texts. The bathhouses, symbols of Islamic civilization, are destroyed because church officials view them as places of sin. The call to prayer is banned. Islamic dress is prohibited. Even speaking Arabic becomes dangerous. Boabdil, in his small territory in the Alpujarras, watches Granada transform into something unrecognizable. The tolerance promised in the treaty has become violent persecution. His people, who surrendered peacefully based on promises of protection, are being systematically oppressed. In 1493, less than 2 years after the surrender, Boabdil gives up. He can't protect his people. He can't stop the persecution. He's powerless in his vassal territory, watching his culture be erased. Boabdil sails for North Africa, settling in Fez, Morocco. He'll live another 40 years, but he'll never see Spain again. He dies in 1533, remembered in Christian sources as a weak king who lost his kingdom, and in Muslim sources as a tragic figure who tried to save his people through negotiation but was betrayed. The fall of Granada in 1492 doesn't just end Muslim Spain. It unleashes a wave of consequences that reshape 3 continents. In March 1492, just 3 months after Granada's surrender, Ferdinand and Isabella issue the Alhambra decree. All Jews in Spain must convert to Christianity or leave within 4 months, abandoning their property. Between 40,000 and 100,000 Jews flee Spain, many settling in the Ottoman Empire, North Africa, and the Netherlands. The Jewish communities that had flourished in Spain for over a millennium are destroyed overnight. Centuries of Sephardic culture, scholarship, and commerce disappear. The economic impact on Spain is devastating. Jewish merchants, doctors, scholars, and artisans represented a huge portion of Spain's educated class. The Inquisition expands dramatically after 1492. Initially created to identify false converts among Jews, it now targets Muslims accused of practicing Islam in secret. Torture becomes routine. Executions multiply. Fear permeates Spanish society. For Muslims in Spain, the situation becomes unbearable. The Alpujarras Rebellion of 1499 to 1501 is brutally crushed. In response, Isabella declares all remaining Muslims in Granada must convert or leave. Most convert, becoming Moriscos, new Christians suspected of secretly maintaining Islamic faith. But even conversion doesn't save them. The Moriscos face constant suspicion, discrimination, and violence. In 1609, over a century after Granada's fall, Spain expels all Moriscos, perhaps 300,000 people, many of whom were born Christian and had never practiced Islam. Spain's religious diversity is completely destroyed. The tolerance that existed under Muslim rule is replaced with religious uniformity enforced through violence and fear. Culturally, the loss is incalculable. Granada's libraries are burned. Arabic texts on mathematics, astronomy, medicine, and philosophy are destroyed. Scientific knowledge accumulated over centuries is lost. The intellectual vibrancy of Al-Andalus is replaced with religious dogma. The irrigation systems built by Muslim engineers fall into disrepair. Agricultural productivity declines. The sophisticated water management that made southern Spain prosperous is forgotten. Architecturally, most Islamic buildings are destroyed or radically altered. The Mezquita of Córdoba has a Gothic cathedral built into its center. Mosques throughout Spain are demolished or converted. Only the Alhambra survives relatively intact, and only because Isabella wanted it preserved as a trophy. But perhaps the most profound impact is psychological and historical. The fall of Granada completes the Reconquista, the Christian reconquest of Iberia. It establishes religious uniformity as a Spanish value. It creates a national identity based on Catholic faith and the defeat of Islam. This mindset will shape Spanish colonization of the Americas. The same year Granada falls, 1492, Columbus reaches the Caribbean. The conquistadors who follow him carry the same religious zeal and intolerance that destroyed Granada. Indigenous peoples in the Americas face the same choice Granada's Muslims faced: convert or die. The techniques of control developed in Granada, forced conversion, cultural suppression, economic exploitation, surveillance through the Inquisition, are exported to the New World. Granada becomes a template for colonization. Meanwhile, in North Africa and the Ottoman Empire, refugees from Al-Andalus preserve what they can of their lost civilization. Andalusian music, poetry, architecture, and cuisine survive in diaspora. The Moriscos bring advanced agricultural and craft techniques to the Ottoman lands. Their descendants maintain Andalusian identity for generations. Today, archaeologists still discover remnants of Granada's Islamic past buried beneath Christian construction. Mosques under churches, bathhouses under plazas, Arabic inscriptions hidden behind plaster. The city is a palimpsest, with layers of history literally written over each other. The Alhambra remains, drawing millions of visitors annually. Most come to admire its beauty. Few understand what it represents: the final monument of a civilization that, for 800 years, made Iberia the intellectual and cultural center of medieval Europe. In some ways, Europe has never recovered from Al-Andalus's loss. The scientific knowledge, religious tolerance, and cultural sophistication of Islamic Spain took centuries to redevelop. The Renaissance that follows partly involves rediscovering knowledge that Spain just finished destroying. Historians debate what Spain might have become if Ferdinand and Isabella had honored the Treaty of Granada, if religious tolerance had continued, if the intellectual traditions of Al-Andalus had been integrated rather than eliminated. It's one of history's great counterfactuals. What we know is what happened. One of Europe's most advanced civilizations was systematically destroyed for religious and political reasons. 800 years of Islamic presence in Europe ended with the keys to Granada changing hands on a cold January morning. Boabdil's last sigh over Granada echoes through history. It's a reminder that civilizations, no matter how sophisticated or seemingly permanent, can fall. That tolerance can give way to persecution. That promises made in treaties can be broken when convenient. The date, 1492, connects Granada's fall to Columbus's voyage, to Jewish expulsion, to the beginning of Spanish colonization in the Americas. It's one of history's pivot points, when one age ends and another begins. Today, visitors to Granada can still walk through the Alhambra, see the Court of Lions, read the Arabic calligraphy that decorates every surface. The inscriptions repeatedly say one thing: there is no victor but God. It's a statement of faith from builders who believed their civilization would last forever. They were wrong. Granada fell. Al-Andalus ended. The last Muslim kingdom in Spain surrendered its keys and rode into exile. But the Alhambra remains, a monument to what was lost, and perhaps a warning about what we might lose if we forget the lessons of tolerance, culture, and civilization that Granada once embodied. Thank you for watching History Files. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the fall of Granada, please like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. Check out our other videos on forgotten moments that changed the world. And remember, history isn't just about what happened. It's about understanding why it matters today. Until next time, keep exploring the files of history.